one of the interesting things is, of course, if you look at the way in which China discusses or pitches the West, it separates between Europe and the US, whereas Russia sees very much the West as, Europe and the US together. So there's quite a sort of fundamental difference in the approach. Now, you mentioned the word war a few times. And of course, a lot of it, again, from a simplistic Western view comes to the question of Taiwan. So tell me, what's your take on Taiwan? Because I think it might be a little bit different from what we hear in the West often.
Taiwan is only a piece on the geopolitical chessboard. Many people support Taiwan. Support Taiwan not because they know very much about Taiwan or because they really love Taiwanese people, but because they see it as a way of somehow controlling China, keeping China down. It's a way of poking China.
Yes.
But they don't realize that for China, Taiwan is a matter of historical justice. Before the Second World War ended in the Cairo Conference, which was attended by Stalin, Churchill, Roosevelt, and Chiang Kai-shek, it was already agreed that Taiwan will be restored to China after the war. And in Potsdam, the Cairo Declaration was reaffirmed. So for China, all the victorious powers agree that Taiwan is part of China, and it's a matter of time. Of course, they prefer to be peaceful, but they cannot give up the possibility of the use of force any more than Madrid can allow Catalonia to declare unilateral independence, or London agree to Scotland declaring unilateral independence. So that is not your preference, because we're the same people. But you cannot say, I will not, because if you don't, then independence is almost a foregone conclusion. The Chinese see many Western powers talking about Taiwan as if it is just a card to be played, but for them, no. So when the German Foreign Minister, Baerbock, visited China recently, State Councillor Wang Yi said something which to me was deeply emotional. He said, we supported German reunification. We hope Germany will support Chinese reunification. And Germany was an aggressive power, whereas China was a victim. So if there was moral cause for German reunification, the moral cause for Chinese reunification is greater. Now, does China want to invade Taiwan? Of course not. And that's the reason why in 2015, Xi Jinping met Ma Ying-jeou, who was then the president of China, in Singapore as an equal. They dinner at Shangri-La. I was with the Quad Big then.
Okay.
They told me that the bill was split 50-50. and the Xi Jinping brought Mao Tai, which is 52%. And Ma Ying-jeou, not to be outdone, he brought Jingmen Gaoliang, which is also 52%. Both are very good liquors. And the words expressed that evening were highly emotional. Xi Jinping took risks meeting the Taiwanese leader as an equal. It was never done before. He did it not for Ma Ying-jeou, who was stepping down. He did it for the current president before she took over. But she's decided that, no, it's better not to have a one China consensus because she's from a political party called the DPP. In the DPP, the first article in the political platform of the party constitution says, our mission is to establish an independent Republic of Taiwan. So China is wondering, when the US plays Taiwan, is it your objective to keep us divided forever? If that is your objective, then there will be war. But if your objective is gradual convergence, then naturally there will be peace. Now, what position does Europe take? But frankly, I think many European leaders take positions without knowing the history, and therefore ambling into a minefield without realizing it is a minefield.
I remember the speaking notes I would always have when I met Chinese counterparts. So remember to mention one China policy. That was always the one. But of course, Taiwan has now, do you see any parallels in between Russia and Ukraine? Because that would be probably the pushback that you will get, is that, this is about territorial integrity and sovereignty, but your interpretation, of course, of the historical aspect of it is completely different from what we see in Russia and Ukraine. So I would assume you don't see those as similar in any which way. Or how do you...
No, the Chinese are consistent. They say territorial boundaries should not be changed by force. So they oppose Russia changing territorial boundaries by force as much as they oppose others wanting to keep Taiwan separate from China. And they don't say it, but by implication, they oppose Russia's invasion. But they also say that invasion had a history. You can't see one snapshot and form a conclusion. You have to watch the video.
Yeah.
And if you want a solution, you must watch the video. You can't just look at the snapshot.
Actually, before we come to the conclusion of our talk, which has been fascinating, my sort of sentiment right now is that if China really wanted to win the hearts and the minds of the global West, it would actually be the main peace mediator here, in a sense that I have a feeling that the only person who can call Putin right now and said, listen, Vladimir, time to stop this, is Xi Jinping himself. So, do you think we're going to move into that kind of a direction where China takes that role on the grand stage?
Not in that way. I think there'll be, if conditions are right and they can play a catalytic role, they will play that role. But they do not see themselves as power brokers, as someone who can bring contending sects together. This is a distant war for them. If Europe and Russia are neighbors on China's borders, then they may take a more interventionist approach. But for them, this is far away. And they don't believe they fully understand the history of the conflict. And therefore, they're quite respectful to the fact that there's no panacea. But they said something recently which moved me. They said you can't negotiate if in your heart you don't open up to the possibility of reconciliation. It begins with the human heart. If both sides see a zero sum, then there can be no peace.
Yeah. That is always, I think, the most difficult thing with finding the war and peace. And then there are, of course, nations and societies that are able to cope with their past. I would argue that Germany was quite good at that after World War II. But then probably, I say this as a Finn, that Russia has been very well at dealing with its Soviet past. But these are the types of difficult dilemmas. Now let's move to the final part. Let's go to the thing spiritual. Now, many of you might not know, but George is a devout Catholic, and he's actually worked for the Holy See as well as an advisor. And at the same time, you have a tremendously broad grasp of different religions. You've worked for universities. A lot of your writings are about Hinduism and Buddhism and the rest of it. But there's one striking, lovely example that you've written about. You have compared the Catholic Church to China. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I tell my European friends that we sometimes say that China is mysterious. I say, China is not mysterious. I say, you understand the Catholic Church as Europeans. See China in the same way. The Pope, like the Emperor, priests like Communist Party cadres, all speeches making moral references, which makes all speeches boring because it's the nuances which matter. But it means that you got to go through everything to find where the nuances are. But for the Chinese, it's not possible to give a major statement of policy without references to the past, to precedents, and to what it seemed to be ideal. It makes the speeches boring. But if you are in that system, you know immediately where the changes are. It's like the way Catholics read paper encyclicals. They're boring. But in certain paragraphs, there's a change here. There's an additional statement there. And that's where the delta is. Both are not as autocratic as people think. The Catholic Church appears autocratic. But religious orders will all vote. Cardinals vote to elect the new pope. But once you're in position, you have authority because it's a large congregation and you need authority to create unity. But there is no arbitrary imposition. The Pope does not. He cannot just on the basis of a whim make decisions. You always say, go through the process. And when finally it comes to him, then you will decide. The same system applies in China. And it's useful for Europeans when they find China mysterious to say, look, think of China as a Catholic Church. Then everything becomes much clearer.
I think it's a wonderful way to end it. George, many thanks for being here with us and having a discussion. And to all of our viewers, I think this has been one of the most fascinating conversations that we've had. Our aim is to basically give depth and understanding from different perspectives around the world on what is going on in geopolitics right now. I at least come out of this conversation understanding China much better than I used to. Hope you do as well, and hope to see you soon in the next episode.
偷偷告诉大家，我最近发现了新法宝 Royal Face 逆时奇迹系列，它有活肤露、全效精华，还有精华霜。尤其我皮肤比较偏干，所以我非常的注重保湿。保湿做得好，肌肤自然烹饪。提亮肤色更年轻，抚平皱纹超有感，而且气色变好。用心保养，每天都更美一点。美吧。